Okay, so we're going to talk about constructors this time. I'm going to start with the same class that I used in the demonstration during the lecture. So the class is called point. Here's the definition. You can pause the movie and copy this down if you don't still have it from in class. So a class is a user-defined data type. I'm creating a new user-defined data type called point. And point has two private members, x and y, x underbar and y underbar, that represent the x and y coordinate of the point. And I only have two methods for my class. I have a setXY method that takes two integer parameters and sets the x and y coordinates, x underbar and y underbar. So it setXY will set the private members. And then I have display point, which just displays the point. Okay, so I'll come down into my main as it is right now, and I haven't created a constructor. So when I create this point, it's going to use the constructor, the default constructor that is synthesized by the compiler for me. So far I've done nothing. But I can still, this still works, and that's because the compiler synthesizes a no argument constructor or a default constructor for me. So when I specify, I'm creating a new variable named me, which is an identifier that represents an instance of the class point. So I have a new object. Memory is allocated, and the default constructor is run. Then I run the display point method. Then I set xy, and I make the point 234, 54, and then display point. And then I set it to 0 again, and then display it again. So let's just run that so you can see how this works before we add our own custom constructors. And so if we look at this, we have I create the point, and then I display point, and I haven't initialized those integer values. So I get that large negative number, which in this environment is indicative of an uninitialized integer. Then I set the x and y values, and I display the point, and it displays the values I've set. I set them again and display it again, and it displays the new values. So nothing new. That's one basic class, has two members and a couple of methods. So now, though, I want to create a constructor. And constructors are methods that are used to, just like they sound, construct new objects. So it gives me a chance to run some custom code to do what I want when that object is built. Okay, so constructors are methods that belong to the object, just like any other method. The difference is a constructor has no return type, and the name of the constructor is the name of the class. So first I will create a no argument constructor, point, and it's no argument constructor, so there's no arguments passed to it. And then I can do whatever I want in the body of that constructor. So what I'm going to do is print out a message saying that I'm in the constructor. This is for our own purposes, so we can visualize the constructor. We can see the constructor running. This is like a debug message. You would never do this in production code. So I'm going to say in no arg constructor. So just display a message so that I know that constructor has fired. And then I am going to set x and y. So I'm going to use my setXY method, and I'll just make my default 0, 0. Okay, so my constructor is going to run. I'm going to print this message saying I'm in the constructor, and then I'm going to set xy to 0, 0 as a default setting for any new object I create of type point will have initial xy coordinates of 0, 0. Okay, let's build that and run it and have a look at what happens. Here I construct a new object called me. So that's when this in_no_arg constructor runs. And then I just, notice I didn't change anything in my main. I haven't changed it. Before, when we did this me display point, we got those big negative numbers that told us it was uninitialized. Now we're getting 0, 0 because when I constructed it, so at the point where I instantiated that object, the constructor was run. It prints this message in no_arg constructor, so I know it was run. And it sets, remember we set the values to 0, 0. We did set xy 0, 0. So it's initialized the x and y coordinates to be 0, 0. I display it and I get 0, 0 instead of those large negative numbers. And everything else works as it did before. Let me just to make it really clear when that constructor is running, I'm going to move my kludge up here. And remember, we have that kludge. What it does is it waits for me to hit enter before it moves on. And I have that in there at the bottom to hold the console window open so I can see the results of my program. So by adding that here, okay, so right now we're right here in the program. Whoops. Okay, we have just finished running, constructing the me object, that instance of the point variable, and I'm waiting for the user to hit return. And as soon as I hit return, then it's going to run me display point. It's going to set the new point, display it again, set it again, display it again. Okay, but all that's happened so far is we've instantiated this new object called me of type point. And that's what's caused the constructor to run. That's what's caused that message to print. And that's what we'll see has set the x and y, x underbar and y underbar, the members of the me object to 0, 0. So I hit enter and there it is. Okay, that's the no_arg constructor. And this worked before because if I don't create a constructor, the compiler creates one for me. Okay, let's create a constructor. Now, when I create a point, I probably already have a location. So what I'd like to do is be able to initialize it when I create it with a location. And to do that, I'll create, in this case, a 2_arg constructor because it takes 2 arguments to set the x and y values of a point. And I'm going to call my parameters tempx and tempy, and that's just to make it really clear that these are parameters. They're different from the x and y that are the member values of this function. Okay, so again, it's a constructor, so it doesn't have a return type, and it's not like setXY that returns a void. It doesn't have a meaningful return type. It doesn't return anything. So I don't even say void. It's just point. Just the name of the class. And then a parameter list if there are any parameters. So for the first one, there were no parameters or no arguments. This one, I'm going to accept 2 arguments. I'm just going to cut and paste from here. So I'm going to print a message saying I'm in the 2_arg constructor. And I'm going to call the setXY method again, but this time I'm going to call the setXY method with temp X, and temp Y. So these are the parameters that are passed in when the user uses the two-ARG constructor. Okay, and see when I highlight that, the other one highlights that. Those are the same variable. So I pass some parameters in, and then I call setX with those same parameters, and setX will then update the X underbar and Y underbar private members with those values. Okay, so that's done. I'll go down to main. Now, this point me, right now it's using the no-arg constructor. I want to use a two-arg constructor, so I'm just going to give it a starting point. I'm going to give it a starting point of 42, 73. So I'm setting its initial X value to 42 and its initial Y value to 73. So that's the only change I'm going to make for now, and I'll build this and we'll have a look at what it does. Okay, so the only difference, it's stopped at this line, my kludge line, where I'm asking the CN object for input, so it's just waiting for input. But notice this time, instead of saying in one arg constructor, it's saying in two arg constructor. So it is firing that other constructor. It's not running the no arg constructor at all. It's running the two arg constructor. Now I'll hit return, okay, and we'll see before I created the very first time, before I created my own custom no-arg constructor, this was first time I printed out the point, it printed out uninitialized values, those big negative numbers. Then I created a no-arg constructor, and I set my X and Y values to be 0, 0. I set a default value of 0, 0. And when I created it using the no-arg constructor, the first time I displayed that point, it displayed 0, 0. Now I'm using my two-arg constructor, and I'm passing in the parameters 42, 73. So I'm constructing that and setting in my constructor an initial value of 42, 73. And the first time I display it, that's what I get. So if you look, I construct the point, I have that kludge to wait for input, and then I display it. There's no setting in between, so it's that construction that's assigning those values. And then I change it and display it, and change it again and display it. So that's a two-arg constructor.